My name is Scott Osborne. I'm the president of the Gulf Coast chapter of UN Women, and it's an absolute delight to see so many familiar members as well as new faces here today. That's a real thrill for us. Our chapter supports the work of UN Women. We advocate for global equality, global gender equality. We raise funds on their behalf, and we advocate the mission of UN Women. But our chapter here is a very vibrant one with a proud tradition. Most of the chapters in the U.S. are in major urban areas, New York, Los Angeles, Miami, etc. But the Sarasota-Bradenton chapter has a very long and proud tradition. For those of you who may know Carol Poteet Buchanan, she was one of our stalwart founders and has really worked a lot. So we carry on in her shoes, and those are big shoes to fill. We have a great program here for you this morning, so now at this time I'd like to introduce Chris Serio-Martin, our Communications Director.
Good morning. I'm going to echo my delight with Scott that you're all here giving us your Saturday morning. I hope you leave with some very good information and, frankly, some optimism. So my job today is to tell you about UN Women, who we are, and what do we do? So if I could have the first slide, Chris. Okay, UN Women is the global agency with the most reach and impact. As you can see by the map, we do work in 90 countries. We invest more than $300 million annually. $300 million annually in gender equality initiatives. We shift cultural norms and we cultivate gender equality. How do we do that? Next slide, please. UN Women works with governments. Number one, to gather data, and data is critical to understanding gender inequality. And then we work with governments to create and implement laws and programs for gender equality. UN Women is compiling the first ever comprehensive global data study on the status of women, which is set to be released this spring. I'm very excited to see what that says. That data is so important for clearly understanding and framing issues in each of the countries where we work. What are their priorities? Education for girls, economic independence for women, clean and accessible water. That data is critical to forming solutions and action plans specific to a country or region, and that data is also fundamental to communicating these action plans. We must be able to show and tell the story in order to create positive change. Folks, if we have your current email, which I hope you left at the desk today, you'll receive a monthly Gulf Coast chapter newsletter. I include what we're doing locally, and I also highlight one of the programs of UN Women Global. Open that newsletter. I know in an era of bad news, you'll be inspired and encouraged by the work. Today I'm going to give you 3 examples of UN Women programs. In Malawi, the work happened at the governmental level. In Vietnam and Syria, UN headed locally to where the people live. Next slide. Data showed that half of all girls married before the age of 18. So what are the consequences of child marriage? Loss of education, increased vulnerability to violence and poverty, and often these young girls had children before they were physically and mentally prepared to be wives and mothers. So what did UN Women do? They lobbied the Malawi government for an end to child marriage. They provided support for a constitutional review process, and they mobilized key in-country partnerships for reform. Consequently, in 2015, the Malawi Parliament unanimously adopted a constitutional amendment raising the minimum age of marriage from 15 to 18 years. That's a big win for girls. And I love this picture of right? I love this picture of Emma Watson with these two students. Both these girls were married and their marriages were annulled under the new law, and consequently they were able to return to school. Next slide, please. In Vietnam, violence prevention starts at the local level. This month, I had the privilege, as a national board member of UN Women USA, of being invited to join the UN team in Vietnam. It's one thing to work on or write about gender equality issues, but to actually witness a UN program really gave me hope for what is possible for women and girls. The data in Vietnam showed that the culture supports male superiority and gender stereotypes. And these cultural norms allow for discrimination and violence against women and girls. In fact, in Vietnam, 2/3 of married women report being victims of domestic violence, and more than 50% of students have experienced gender-based violence. So what did UN Women do? They formed local partnerships in Vietnamese cities with women's unions and local governmental leaders to create male advocacy clubs. These are social clubs where men and women meet to learn and discuss how to stop violence against women and to shift these cultural norms. The group photo shows a gathering in Da Nang of 30 UN Women representatives from 10 leadership countries, including a few of us from the US. We met with the male advocate clubs from the area, and together we did some fun interactive group exercises and discussed how to stop violence against women. During my favorite activity, shown in the other photo, Post-it notes were distributed and attendees were asked the question, what does a life without violence mean to you? Some of the responses: not being afraid to ride the bus to work or to school. Not experiencing violence in my own home. Not carrying the heavy fear of sexual assault. In response, the next question was, how do we address these fears and create a world without violence? Most of the answers from the group, including those from the Vietnamese men, revolved around cultivating respect for women. Clearly, through these local programs, cultural norms are beginning to shift in Vietnam. Next slide, please. In closing, I want to show a short film. More than 5.6 million Syrians have been forced to flee their country since 2011, many finding their way to refugee camps. What UN Women does in these refugee camps is remarkable. They provide critical basic needs, community engagement, and support. They provide education and economic development for women and girls. And they also help guard women and girls against violence and child marriage in the camps. Let's roll the film.
نحن كنا بسوريا ميسورين بس هون طلعنا بايدينا، يعني اللي طلع لابس اللي كان لابس طلع لابس واللي كان شالح طلع شالح. اللي ناس طلعت ما في بجايه شحاط، يعني بجد وانا محكيكي بجد طلعنا من بيوتنا بجينا ما في شحاط. ثاني بيت اللي طلعت منه طلعت حفياني انا. بدي اقرب اولادي بدي اخذ وناس عم تشيل جرحى وناس عم تشيل يعني هيك.
انهدم بيتي بصاروخ، نفسياتنا كلها تعبت، بس قعدنا حوالي سنة كل ما له عصبيته تزيد، نفسيته تحطمت، بقى يعاملنا أنا والولاد كتير معاملة وحشة، زاد انفصلنا وقال لي المسؤولية كلها عليكي. وقت اللي مشي هو وقفت أنا حيرانة ما عارفة شو بدي أعمل، منين بدي أجيب مصاريف ولادي مدرستهم غير هذا أكلهم.
مآسي الحياة خلتني بطل ابني من المدرسة. ابني عمره 13 سنة لما بلشت شغله، هلأ حاليا عمره 14. وطبعا تعرض لكتير شغلات في الطريق ما منيحة. بنتي بطلتها من المدرسة مشان إجارات الدروس. شفت أولادي عم يضيعوا مني وماني قادر أقدم لهم شي، فاستسلمت للنوم. اكتئبت كتير. يعني شايفة أولادي مو قادرين ولا ياكلوا ولا يشربوا ولا يعملوا أي شي، فخلص صرت منهارة.
والله وضع كنت الصف التاسع، وضع بسوريا ما كان طيب، مشان هيك تركت الدراسة وجيت على إقليم كردستان. والله العيشة مو كتير طيبة، يعني نقضي حياتنا كلها بالكامب.
لما وصلنا على الأردن واجهنا صعوبات كتير كتير كتير، خاصة البرد. ما كانش في حرامات تغطي ولادي، ولا إنه كان كل شي صعب، وولادي عانوا وكتير صاروا ينكوا بدهم يروحوا. بس اللي لقينا الفرق إنه كنا ننام يعني نومة إنه بدون قصف، وضلينا هيك إشي السنة يعني وإحنا نعاني لحد ما لقينا وظيفة بالهيئة الأمم المتحدة للمرأة.
يؤدي إلى الطلاق، نسمع المستوى الثقافي المتدني.
أنا جيت يعني على المركز عشان أتعلم، لأن أنا ما أخذتش فرصتي بالحياة إني أدرس، وأنا عندي عندي 5، بس بناتي ال3 كانوا يطلبوا مني دائما أدرسهم، ما أقدر، كنت أستحي منهم، أتهرب منهم، يعني أوديها على أختها ما أقدرش. يوم من الأيام دفعني إني أجي أدرس صممت إني أدرس، لازم يعني إشي أعمله يا بنات يا أولادي.
لو ما في شغل، كلن ما عنده شغل وقاعدين بالبيت مع نسوان، ما في غيرهم مشاكل.
أنا باحثة اجتماعية بالسنتر، أستقبل النسوان عندي مشاكل النساء المعنفات مثلا كاجتماعيا أو معنويا أو نفسيا، يعني أساعدهم بأي شيء وأعطي دورات توعية للنساء.
وعاقل، مو إنسان مو عنده عقل وهالشي، يعني واعي وعاقل، بس بناحية مرته هيك عصبيته زيادة عن اللزوم.
المرأة تعتبر معنفة أكثر من الثانية لأنها لاجئة. الصعوبات التي أواجهها في عمل كباحثة اجتماعية من النساء الذين يخافون من التحدث عن مشاكلهم، لأنه مجتمع منغلق داخل الكامب. عندنا فريق الموبايل تيم، هن اللي يساعدوني يدورون بين الكامب، يعملوا إحصائيات للنساء المعنفات وشنو المشاكل اللي يتعرضون لها.
I would like to introduce the very fantastic Kathy Berna, our membership board member.
Have a fan club. I'm Kathy Berna, and I am so glad to see so many members, friends, supporters, and guests here today. I think this is the largest turnout we've ever had, so our time is now, obviously. I'm here to give you a brief summary of what we did last year. Our theme last year was the power of voice. We started our year with our fall lunch right here in beautiful Michael's on East. We explored the topic of finding our voices, and our speaker, Dr. Tracy Cooper, gave an insightful talk about the effects of economic inequality. Next, in January, Bookstore One hosted our first community event called The Power of Speaking Up at Me Too 2019. It was a well-attended event that sparked many conversations. there was standing room only at the end there. In February, we held our winter walk at Payne Park. We call it a walk, I call it an amble. It's a stroll. It was a beautiful day. We had a huge turnout. We teamed up with many different community groups, and we raised a lot of money. On March 8th, we celebrated International Women's Day at the Arts Centre. Our theme was the power of voice through books, and our speaker, Dr. Deborah Plant, talked to us about Zora Neale Hurston. We wrapped up our year by celebrating the 20th anniversary of our International Film Festival, Through Women's Eyes, in April. And now we're right back here in lovely Michael's-on-East at the start of a new season. So I am the membership chair of the Gulf Coast chapter, and last year I stood here and told you that we had 65 members and we were growing. And today I'm very glad to report that we have 106 members. Those of you who know me know I have been chasing the elusive triple digit all year. I've been, come on, we're almost there. So we broke it in October, yay. But you know what? There's 180 of us here today. We have 59 members here. So if I do my math right, there's over 100. So we need to break that 200 level membership today. Right. Now, increasing our membership is not just about increasing our numbers or pulling in more money. It's also increasing our volunteers. We are a volunteer-based organization, and without volunteers, we simply cannot function. There were many helpers today to put this event on. Perhaps they helped us get a raffle item or a silent auction item. Perhaps they helped set up the room. Perhaps they were busy behind the scenes. I thought I'd read out our volunteers for today's event, and if you are here, do please stand up so we can see you. So, Terry Brackett, Eddie Bennett, here we go, Georgia Courts, Jeffrey Cornwell, Holly Friedman, Kitty Galdica, Irene Gottlieb, come on, stand up, April Glasgow, Aliki Gable, Ginny Hitchcock, Nelson Jennings, Dulcie Kincaid, Lita Caldy Davis, Jody McBride, Todd Martin, Biz Osborne, Anya Palumbo, Eileen Raffo, Terry Rixey, Anne-Marie Sledziewski, Diana Shoemaker, Margaret Schmidt, Kristen and Jared Seymour, Kay Yoder, and my husband, Howard Berna. I cannot function without Howard Berna. Thank you all so very much for your help. Along with these volunteers, your board member has been very hard at work as well. Our bylaws state that we must have one annual meeting every year and that our membership must be informed of its date, time, and location at least 30 days in advance. If you were a member in good standing at the beginning of September, you will have received an email from me containing the invitation to this meeting, the minutes of our last board meeting, the budget for the upcoming year, and the slate of the board of directors. You were asked to vote on the budget and the directors, and I'm glad to tell you that you approved. We had a 35% voter turnout. So, on a membership level, if you didn't get my email and you are a member, contact me because I've got the wrong email for you. Right. I would like to invite the board, the current board, and the new board members up to the podium at this time. Do we have a handheld mic? Where's our handheld? We have to have a picture?
At the communications people.
So do we have a handheld mic?
I don't know where it is. What do we need?
We're going to introduce ourselves.
Okay, go ahead.
All right. Well, I'm Kathy Berner. I do membership.
Chris Martin, Communications and Marketing.
Scott Osborne, President.
Suzanne Chalub, Treasurer. Mary Daly.
Eileen Oldwine. I'm at large. I do whatever needs to be done. Debbie Jennings, Programs.
Kim Cartledge. And Debbie Vale.
Thank you. And while the board does a huge amount for this and our volunteers, there's one volunteer without whom this entire event would not have been possible. So at this time, we'd really like to give an extra special thank to Eileen Raffo. Eileen, could you come up just 1 second? This event for the past few years would not look like what it does or raise the funds that it does without the behind-the-scenes work of Eileen. So we just wanted to thank her especially today. As a chapter, we have many annual events. We have this lunch. We have our film festival going into its 21st year. But we have one event which meets every month, year in and year out, for the past 16 years, which is almost unheard of in the volunteer world. This is our UN Women Book Group. This started as an informal event and then slowly evolved to become something a little bit more structured so that people would read books from women of developing countries, and you can see some of the samples that we have here. It also involved special events on occasion with lunches and author readings and discussions and field trips. Every meeting involved vibrant discussion, but it also had educational materials with it. Many people who are members of our chapter today came to us through what we call the back door of the book group. That was their first introduction to the book group. But this book group, its membership, the selection of the books, the special events, the educational information, the mailing list, the reports afterwards, none of that would have been possible without the work of Lita Caldi Davis. As you can see, we're a very accomplished volunteer group, but Lita somehow seems to outshine us all. She comes to this very well qualified. Before coming to Sarasota, Lita worked for UNESCO and in the United Nations. She was at the Tufts Fletcher School of Law and Diplomacy and Harvard University. She taught the Roma people for 15 years in Europe, and then at 55 became a Peace Corps volunteer in Senegal. After she finished that service, she went on to Haiti, where she worked for the Albert Schweitzer Hospital. Moreover, she's an author herself, with a book about Senegal and a book about Haiti and travel memoirs to her credit. Lita has received many awards, but most recently she traveled to Atlanta to receive the Lillian Carter Award, which, and I know we have many returned Peace Corps volunteers in the room, you'll know is a huge honor for any volunteer who accomplishes the third goal of the Peace Corps, to bring the message back home, a senior volunteer who starts after 50. So Lita received the Lillian Carter Award just this past year. Lita is a friend and an ally to aspiring writers. She's an incredible ambassador for social justice. for women's rights, for global concerns, and for all things literary. She says she's retired, but between our book group and every time I speak to her, she seems to be working for some new cause or supporting another group in need. So I don't call that retired. That's just Lita. We are incredibly grateful and privileged to have her with us. So on behalf of the board and all of the membership, we want to recognize Lita Caldy Davis this morning.
Thank you, Scott. Thank you, members of the board, for this wonderful honor. It's humbling to be recognized for doing something you love. I love to read. I love books. I especially love sharing books with the dynamic, well-read, well-educated, well-traveled participants of our book club. We read stories from places like North Korea, Burma, Rwanda, Brazil, stories written by women that enable us to understand more deeply the situation in their respective countries. Now that the United Nations priority is gender equality, I suppose we're going to have to consider male authors. I admit to being a diehard on this subject, but I could countenance some male authors who are outstanding writers and who write, of course, about women. So I just want to thank you all for making my literary journey so meaningful, and thank everyone for supporting the imperative goals of UN Women. Thank you.
But just because we're giving Lita this honor, that she's not retiring, don't anybody worry. That's not in the cards. Well, I don't think that's allowed. When you leave here today, we really hope you'll be impressed by the work of UN Women and certainly want to do more with our chapter. But we really want something more. When you go away, we really want you to be an activist. We need you to be an activist. You might be an employee or a manager or perhaps a company owner. You are a volunteer or a shareholder somewhere. You might be a theater goer or a museum patron. You're probably a board member or a volunteer somewhere. You're certainly a consumer and undoubtedly a family member. Every single one of these roles gives you an opportunity to make a difference. Let me explain how. Gender equality is important for everyone. It's not just something nice that we do for girls and women. It's important for societies. Study after study shows that when we have more gender equality, we do better. We all do better. We are more educated, we are healthier, our companies are more prosperous. So we know that in communities and countries and companies around the world, more gender equality is better for everyone. It's foundational. But it's not just happening on its own. We need activists to bring that about. That's where you come in. So whether or not you want to do more with our chapter, I really want you to think about these 4 things that I'm going to tell you and see how you can integrate them into your lives. Number 1, combat everyday sexism and stereotypes. If you were with us for our lunch last year, we had a humorous game show actually called What Do You Say?, which looked at how you can respond when you hear a sexist or a racist or a homophobic comment, because people say they do hear that. So it was funny, but it was a real subject. Let me just talk a little bit more about that again this year. We all know what it's like. You're at a cocktail party and you overhear a sexist comment. You're at a meeting and someone talks over a woman. You're watching television and a commentator makes fun of Prince George, the littlest British royal, for taking ballet lessons, I think it was. You have a friend, a male friend, who says he helps out with the kids. We've all heard something like this. These things, unfortunately, aren't just jokes. We sort of chuckle, but these accumulated attitudes and behaviors and methods of speaking make a difference. They shape our cultures, they shape our workplaces, they shape our relationships, they shape our lives. They make a difference. I'll give you another example. Think about money. Very often in popular culture, women and money are portrayed like women are sort of the guardians of the family budget. We're in charge of frugality and saving and that sort of thing. But men are investment managers, men have long-term goals, men have power suits and Rolex watches. The sound is different. Think about appearances. If we bring a gendered approach to appearances, it's hard to shift the narrative. It's wonderful to look nice. I hope you all do. I'm sure you all do. But if we consistently talk about women's appearances in a way that we would not for men, we're not helping. How are we going to get our female political candidates taken seriously if we continue to focus on things like appearance? These things do make a difference, and we all can play a part in changing that narrative. Or finally, don't silo women's events. You know the TED Talks, now it's a juggernaut. Originally it was 1 or 2. There's a TED Women's. It feels like a pet project of TED. Why do we have a TED Women? Since when are women's things not part of human things? We are 50% of the population. So be careful you don't silo women's issues. That reinforces some stereotypes. So first thing, change your own thinking and be an active bystander. If you overhear something, speak up. You can find a fun or a humorous or a gentle way to say something. Speak up. Be an active bystander and help us out. Combat sexist and gender stereotypes. 2, be an advocate for women in public. I don't know about you, but I really like the diversity of our country. I think it's one of the crown jewels of America. And when I go out in public places, I like to see a little bit of this diversity. It makes it nice. It makes it fun. Perhaps like you, I'm also a museum goer. So when you go to museums, what kind of diversity do you think you see? I will clue you in, not very much. You're pretty much seeing the art of white men. If you haven't thought about this, think about it when you go to the museum next. Of the top 100 museums in America, so that's the Met, the LA Contemporary Museum, Philadelphia, Boston, etc. The permanent collections, 87% of the permanent collections are men. 85% are white men. Okay, now you might think, well, that's history, that's the permanent collections, we know what the histories look like, but things are different now, right? We've all changed. The last 10 years, from 2008 to 2018, acquisitions of these museums, 12% women, 12%. We're barely above the double digits here. And I'm sorry, if you're from Boston, the Boston Museum of Fine Art, 4% of recent acquisitions were women. That's like a rounding error. That's not half the population. We know there are women artists out there. How are they going to get work? So think about that. Okay, what about movies? You might say there's been a big change in movies. Well, think again. In 2018, of the 100 top grossing films, 3% were directed by women. And you know that producers weren't much beyond that. Women are still 4 times more likely to be naked on screen. It's true. Men still speak twice as much in films, so we haven't made a lot of progress there. And we'll take one more in that line, the theater. In the 2016-17 New York theatrical productions, the Broadway plays that have female playwrights, 11%. And off-Broadway is not much better. So you see where I'm going with this. But you can make a difference. You can be an advocate for women in public. You're a patron. You're a member of these museums. Maybe you're a volunteer. Maybe you're on a board. Maybe you work for these galas. You can make a difference. Speak to them. Say, hey, I love this, but why aren't there more female artists here? We need to change. We can bring some in. You do have a voice, and they listen to you. So think about that. It's not nothing. Think about books. Next time you go to your local independent bookstore, look at the tables. Are most of the books by men? Tell them. They'd be happy to know. Say, hey, I love your bookstore. Maybe you could bring in some more female authors here. Or if you're signing up for your next speakers panel, are women distributed on that speakers panel? Or if you're a man, don't be on a panel that's only women. This is 2019. It's not necessary. Unless you're discussing personal experiences with prostate cancer, I think you can find some women to be on those panels. Trust me, we're there. So be an advocate for women in public. I can't stress how important this is. Next thing, be a conscious consumer. And there's three parts of this. There's products, there's companies, and then there's politics. So for products first, let's play the video. Just take a look.
So, on my show, what I like to do is I like to promote kindness and equal rights, and I don't like labels, and I don't see color. I'm like a Cocker Spaniel in that way. And I don't like pointing out differences between people, especially men and women. And I thought that women, we've made a lot of progress towards equality. And we're allowed to vote, and I think since 1982 now. And we can wear pants, we can drive at night, all those things have happened. And then I saw something that makes me think we still have a little bit of ways to go. It's a new product from Bic, the pen company. And they have a new line of pens called Bic for Her. And this is totally real. They're pens just for ladies. I know what you're thinking, it's about damn time. Where have our pens been? Can you believe this? We've been using man pens all these years. Yeah! And they come in both lady colors, pink and purple. And they're just like regular pens, except they're pink, so they cost twice as much. That is absolutely true as well. The worst part is they don't come with any instructions. So how do they expect us to learn how to write with them, I was reading the back of the pack. Well, I had a man read the back of the package to me. And it said it's designed to fit a woman's hand. This is all true. I'm not making any of this up. Designed to fit a woman's hand. What does that mean? So when we're taking down dictation from our bosses, we'll feel comfortable and we'll forget we're not getting paid as much? I don't know. I mean, just think over the last 20 years, companies have spent millions of dollars making pills that grow men's hair and fix men's sex lives, and now ladies have a pen. We have come a long way, baby.
I can't say it any better than Ellen. You get the pink products thing. We don't need them. That's products. But you're also a consumer in a way of companies and organizations. You support companies. Women control 70% of disposable income and a heck of a lot of non-disposable income. Think about the companies you're buying products from. Think about the organizations perhaps that you volunteer for. There's a few things you can look for. Are their boards made up of women? Do their boards have half the women? This is important. Do they have pay transparency? Women will not start to have pay equity until we have pay transparency. Do they have generous family leave policies? These are hugely important to women. And you don't even have to do all the research yourselves anymore. There's all kinds of indicators that can provide you with that information. Do a little bit of homework and say, is the group that I'm volunteering with or perhaps I have investments. If you've got savings, your money is sitting somewhere. Is it sitting in a company that is doing the right thing by gender? It doesn't take that long to figure out, and that's a huge weight that makes a big difference. So be a conscious consumer with those companies. If you're on a board of an organization, ask them, are we 50% women? We're half the population. There's no reason it's not there now. Finally, the third thing to be a conscious consumer is politics. I won't be partisan, but I think you should look at the record and the concern for gender equity when you go to the voting booth. So be a conscious consumer. Finally, fourth, support organizations that work on gender equality. It's not trickling down. We started by saying that gender equality is foundational for everyone, not just this nice thing we do. It's foundational for everyone. It will help us all. So we need to support organizations that work on that goal. Not enough is being invested. Of all the private money Americans donate, 1.6% goes to organizations that work on gender equality. 1.6%. That's nuts. It's not happening without that. So we really need to work on that. Excuse me. It's chronically underfunded. Look, we're educating girls like never before. We're launching them into the world. They're being educated all over the globe. We can't be putting up these barriers after they get out of education. We see these things down the road. We know what they're going to be hitting. We've got to start to change the landscape. And it is truly possible. If everybody can be an activist in their own life, I truly believe it is possible. I am the eternal optimist. So, 4 things you can be an activist. Combat everyday sexism and stereotypes. Speak up for women in public places. You can do it gently, but do it. Be a conscious consumer. Your products, your groups and organizations, where you spend your money, and invest in companies and organizations that help gender equality. And on that note, before we take a little lunch break, I would really like to thank our sponsors because they are part of that 1.6%. They're in the back of your program. I think some of them are here today, but we really want to thank Oslo Rep, WUSF, Helmuth Landscape, excuse me, Relief Resources, Coastal Eye Institute, which has been a supporter of us for many years. Please see them. Michael Burns of the Morgan Stanley Group and CAE. We're really very grateful to all of them. So please give them a round of applause at the moment. And now that you're all going to be part of that 1.6%, this is a fundraiser. We really need your help. You've seen the work of UN Women. We need your help to get there. We were very lucky with this lunch that we had some very loyal supporters who gave us $5,000 even before we opened the doors. But I said I would be able to match that around this room today. So I am really asking each of you to do your part. There's almost 200 people here. I know we can do that. There's a donation card on all of your tables. If there aren't enough, someone will come around and give you one. We have a treasurer and a few people with a credit card swipe, and you can swipe and go away really happy knowing you're part of the 1.6%. That's an important group. So there are many ways to give. Our raffle and our silent auction, while we take a little lunch break, please go over there, check out these things. You'll get something in exchange. If you use our donation card or our credit card swipe, you will get a tax-deductible certificate. We're completely tax-exempt, but we really need your help. I can't stress that enough. Finally, you can even buy our centerpieces, which are beautiful. We're committed to sustainability, and we didn't want disposable centerpieces. You just take this little blue card, and you can purchase a centerpiece and take it home with you. So we really want you to help us out. We're delighted you're here. Please go home and be an activist. We're going to take a few minutes for a lunch break now, and then we'll pick up with some wonderful things after lunch. Thank you. Two small matters of business before we start again. One, for those of you who are not familiar with the Commission on the Status of Women, that's a big thing. And here in Florida, they're conducting a survey, which is incredibly important in preparation for an annual meeting next year. So if you have a moment and can go onto their website, and that's the FCSW, Florida Commission on the Status of Women, just because they are doing a survey and they would like your input. So we would really appreciate that. Finally, before you leave today, we have some good things coming up, but before you leave, figure out who on your table will be taking home the centerpiece. That's a beautiful vase, and someone on your table should take it home. So take that little blue card and figure out who would like that centerpiece to take home, because they all must go home with you. So I hope you had a few moments to check out the raffle and the silent auction, but I have some more wonderful guests I want to introduce. You're getting a sense of what UN Women does around the world, and we're very proud of that work. But we also realize how much is being done for gender equality here today. So today we really wanted to recognize a few organizations and themes which are championing gender equality for us right here. So if you'd please play that video.
Good afternoon, everybody. Sport has the power to change lives by teaching women and girls teamwork, self-reliance, resilience, and confidence. Sport is one of the great drivers of gender equality. Women in sport defy gender stereotypes and social norms, make inspiring role models, and show men and women as equals. UN Women has been a driver for gender equality through sport from the very beginning. So today we are delighted to recognize the Women's Sports Museum. This is the only museum dedicated entirely to women in sports, and it will be right in Sarasota. Preview spaces open at UTC Mall this winter, and we hope a full museum soon after. So I'd like to recognize Janelle Wells from the Board of Women in Sports Museum and thank them for doing their part to champion gender equality. And this is our gift to you for all that you do.
Oh, thank you. Well, thank you, Scott Osborne, and your team, as well as the UN Women Gulf Coast chapter. Today, because of sport, I stand before you. Because of sports, I earned scholarships for the opportunity to earn my bachelor's, to earn my master's, and to earn my doctorate. Because of sport, I have the opportunity to coach and to teach thousands of individuals from culturally diverse backgrounds. Because of sports, I get to research. My research has impacted to help reduce homelessness through Street Soccer USA and also to reduce the gender inequities of women climbing the corporate ladder in sport and entertainment. Because of sports, I also get to bond with my children, on a friendly game of horse, until mommy wins and they know I still have it, right? Because of sports, I've also traveled the world. And matter of fact, next week I will lead a group of 30 USF graduate students so that they too can become culturally aware. Because of sports, I get to serve, and particularly on a board that is dedicated to gender equity, and that is the Women's Sports Museum. The Women's Sports Museum, it began as a vision just 3 years ago, okay? And this vision, as Elaine had said, is becoming a reality. This reality right in our backyard with dedicated space in 2020, okay, at the Sarasota Mall and the UTC. Like UN Women, we too support this gender equality. And combining that, as Scott said, 85%, no, we will have 100% of our museum dedicated solely to women and girls in sport to represent our past, present, and future. At this time, I'd like to play an inspiring video. Regine King said it best. We need a permanent place that showcases our history, it celebrates our accomplishment, and it inspires the future. So on behalf of the Women's Sports Museum, please join our movement, join us on social, and join us for our launch event on November 16th, because the time is now to be activists and inspire others. Thank you.
Hello again. Our chapter members are a diverse and fascinating group, but even among our accomplished group, Dr. Jody McBrien is one who stands out. Jody is professor at the University of South Florida since 2002. She has received issues of refugee settlement internationally and received numerous research awards. This past summer, she was a Fulbright specialist evaluating resettlement procedures in New Zealand. She recently published a book on educational policies and practices in English-speaking refugee settlement countries. In 2010, she collaborated with organizations in the Tampa Bay area to create a photo project and exhibit with refugee youth. So Jody is the perfect person to help us recognize the United Nations Association, and Haneen, a photographer with this year's UNA Tampa Bay Picture My Life. Please welcome her. Welcome, welcome. And we have a student you're going to introduce.
Good afternoon. Is this working? There, I'm short. We're very grateful to the United Nations Association of Tampa Bay and its president, Clint Elbow, stand and be recognized, for being such consistent and dedicated advocates of gender equality, including their advocacy for CEDAW, which is the Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women, and their promotion of women in the arts. We're fortunate to have such active partners in our own pursuits of social justice and equality. Today, we'd also like to recognize the UNA of Tampa Bay for making possible the refugee photo project called Picture My Life. This project provided 12 refugee high school students with cameras and instructions in how to take high-quality photos. As such, this project gives voice, dignity, and skills to the participants, something especially critical for young women. It also provides them the means to make money, as their photographs are for sale. Surely you've heard the saying, a picture is worth 1,000 words. This may be even more true when artists are not able to fully express themselves in the words of a new language. This is not the case, though, for our guest today. We have one of our young photographers from the exhibit who's going to explain the photo project. Haneen Hassan is 15 years old, and her family is originally from Palestine. She wrote that photography showed her how a memory of a specific time can be saved forever. Haneen enjoys how the camera has boosted her creativity skills. So, Haneen, can I have you come up and join me right now? Thank you. So, welcome. And thanks so much for being here to tell us all about the project. How did you get interested in this photo project?
Okay. So I was interested by photography because of the careers that my family used to have with photography. They built a successful career with it, so I decided to do photography when my mom bought me my first camera. So thank you to Coach Carolyn who invited me to this program because it's probably one of the best programs I've ever joined.
What has it meant to you to exhibit your photos to the public and to be at the exhibits, to be able to speak to people that came to see them?
It was a really great opportunity to showcase my photos because I usually don't get the opportunity to showcase my photos every day. So having to meet new people and share my story with them was a great opportunity.
So the audience here has gotten to see 3 of your photos, and I'm wondering if you can say something about the photos that you selected for everyone to see. What memories do they say for you, and how do they picture your life?
So these are the 3 main photos I choose. This is my favorite one of the portrait of Eliza. It was taken at our last field trip with Picture My Life, which was one of the most memorable experiences. And the next 2, this is a beautiful village in Palestine called Dura el-Qara'. This is where my family is from, where my father is. And usually in that village, it's just like family, really close family members. I really loved the experience going there last summer because it was my first time, and I enjoyed meeting my family members I've always heard about through online. So seeing them for the first time was really memorable. And the second photo, which is the Dome of the Rock, it's one of the holiest sites of Islam. And it was really hard to get there because of what happens overseas. So being there was probably one of the best experiences.
Do you have any plans to continue with photography, and what part will photography have in your future, do you think?
I will most likely study photography later on because it's amazing art that I can do because there's no rules, and it really does help my creativity skills boost and get better. So I definitely would like to study photography in the future.
Again, thanks. It's such a pleasure to have you here, and thanks also to the UNA of Tampa Bay.
Thank you. Thanks so much. Thank you. We're so lucky. We have such talented people in our group and who work with us most of the time, all of the time, some of the time, whatever time they can afford to. UN Women started the wildly popular He for She movement 5 years ago. But even before that, UN Women has been engaging men around the world. Gender equality is not just a women's problem. And now organizations in the United States are stepping up to help us better understand men's roles at home, at work, and in the community. One of our heroes in engaging men is undoubtedly Dr. Philip Wagner. Phil is officially the Regional Assistant Vice Chancellor of Academic Affairs at USF-SM, but he wears many hats. He serves as the chair of the Chancellor's Advisory Council on Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion from 2016 to 2019, and remains actively committed to diversity and inclusion work. His research has been featured in top journals such as Communication Quarterly, the International Journal of Men's Health, the Journal of Applied Communication, Research, and Women in Language, as well as through other platforms. Dr. Wagner has been a staunch ally of our Gulf Coast chapter, and we are delighted to welcome him here today. Please welcome Dr. Philip Wagner.
Thank you. Thank you. I am not short. My dear colleague, Jody. So I've spent the better half of a decade as a scholar, as a researcher, as a teacher, and as an ally, really trying to better understand the mask of masculinity. This thing that men incessantly, but sort of inexplicitly, cling onto for some reason. I think it's really important for educators to be heavily involved in that conversation. And so I've been involved again for the better half of a decade. And I think it's important for educators to be involved because we're having conversations surrounding this topic every single day. We have this idea of masculinity, and we have this idea of what we want masculinity to be, but we haven't sort of married the two. So in line with what we think, let me see if this technology will work here today. Oh, there it is. Okay. So some of the conversations we have about masculinity are centered around what it means to be a good man. And so I'm a teacher, and I'm going to teach a little bit here today. So if I were to ask you, the audience, what is it that makes a man a good man? What are those characteristics that make a man of character a good man? What are they? Kindness, empathy, good communicators. Oh, you guys can come to my class. This is great. This is great. Okay, so these are characteristics that make a good man, and we can agree that those are good characteristics. The thing, though, is that we don't often have conversations about these, because a good man is what? Oh, you know, he's hard to find, right? Why is that? I think it's because we don't have conversations about what makes men good. We have conversations instead about what makes men real. What makes a man a real man? Oh, that shifts the conversation quite significantly, right? And there are a host of descriptors we use to classify real men and to differentiate men from the real men. It actually has a lot to do with what we see in terms of how we classify women. So as a researcher, when we look at the research on how we classify women, and these are stereotypes, I want to acknowledge that, we see that these are the terms we often use to define women and women's experiences. Women are dependent, emotional, passive, sensitive, quiet, graceful, weak, nurturing, self-critical, soft, sexually submissive, and accepting. I do not buy those. You do not either, but many people do, and that's why we're here today. But while it's important to focus on how we classify women in those assumptive terms, I want to look at how we classify men. Because what we've done is we have framed men in literally the most opposite of terms. We've created a problem. The problem is women. And who can solve that problem? Nobody better but a man, right? You don't want to be dependent, depending on other people. You want to be independent. You don't want to be weak. You want to be strong. So whereas women, we see them as emotional, we say men are supposed to be non-emotional. Whereas women are passive, we are supposed to say that men are supposed to be aggressive. Men are supposed to be tough and bold and competitive and strong and active and self-confident and hard and sexually aggressive and rebellious. We've created a problem. We've said it's men's duty to solve that problem. So I think it's really interesting, though, how we code that all the way down to the youngest members of our society, right? We codify this into men, and we expect that men, even from infancy, will enact those characteristics. And as funny and cheeky as it is, we know that it has very serious consequences as well. You know, we often like to use an excuse pretty early on in men's lives to say that boys will be boys. No, they will not. Boys will be exactly what you teach them to be. This is precisely why we have to be having conversations on men and masculinity in spaces and places like this. And this is personal for me because I arrive at my commitment to gender equity for all people, not just for my daughter, but for my son as well. And as personal as it is for me, I know that it's personal for you too. But it really is a problem for all of us because men are doing a lot of destructive damage, and it goes so much further than what we think. Men are causing a lot of damage. For instance, men are killing the planet. This comes from research in the Journal of Consumer Research in 2014. And researchers found, this is very interesting, men believe that bringing a reusable grocery bag to a store is considered feminine, and therefore they're less likely to do it. So the UN sustainability goals shot because men are propping up some notion of masculinity. On a serious note, we know that men are killing women, and more than 1 in 3 women and more than 1 in 4 men in the U.S. report having experienced rape, physical violence, stalking, or intimate partner violence in their lifetime. That's 20 people per minute, totaling over 10 million people per year. And it starts early. It codes early. Men who are experienced to domestic violence as a child are 3 to 4 more times likely to perpetrate it as adults. We also know that men are killing each other. When we look at Congress's definition of mass shootings, there have been 115 of those such codified cases since 1982. Of those 115 mass shootings, 111 were carried out by men. That's significant. And then men are killing themselves. Suicide is a leading cause of death among men. In 2017, the suicide rate for men in the United States was 3.5 times higher than it was for women. And the most common suicide demographic is middle-aged white men. So in their pursuit of clinging to this notion of masculinity, this rough, tumble, aggressive, strong, bold masculinity, men are doing a lot of damage. So I think it's really important that we all zone in and try to fix this problem. Thankfully, there are educators attempting to do just that. Now, I get a little oof when I hear people say, oh, we have so many women's studies programs. What about men's studies? Well, we have that. It's called history, right? So my goal as an educator is not to lobby to create more spaces for men in the academy. It's to use feminist spaces and inclusive spaces to better understand men, with the understanding that this puts men at the forefront too. This is in men's best interest as well. Thankfully, there are entities across the United States and really across the globe that put men in the spotlight for these initiatives to help us better understand how we can reach men and bring them into the fold. He for She is an initiative I care very deeply about, have been passionately involved with. There are other scholarly entities as well, and what these scholarly entities have done is push programs into colleges and universities which are meaningful spaces to engage men. I'm a faculty member at the University of South Florida. We offer a lot of on-the-ground resources. Some of the national best practices come from University of the Redlands in their Dudes Conference, which is sort of a pop-up men's convention where they engage men in diversity conversations and ending stereotypes. The UNC Chapel Hill Men's Project, where they do much of the same thing. And then the nation's only Center for Men and Masculinity Studies at the State University of New York, Stony Brook University, which is home to activists and scholars such as Michael Kimmel. What those folks have done then is then taken those ideas from a scholarly lens and pushed them out into the public. And so I encourage you all to get involved with book club, because books and reading change lives, books and reading change ideologies, and it's a great way to start changing the conversation on what it means to be a healthy man and not engage in toxic masculinity. I would give a warning, though, that as you engage in those readings and those research, remember that these spaces can be toxic too. And I would give you a call today to make sure that as you engage with studies on masculinity and men's studies, make sure that the authors and the places of those publications are truly altruistic and inclusive. Many of these spaces can be trans exclusionary, they can be predominantly white spaces, and I think we have too much to risk by not including everybody in this conversation because there's so much on the table. I conclude today with some of the things that I have found in my decade of research, activism, scholarship, and teaching on how to be a better male ally. They follow perfectly on Scott's call earlier for a call to action. These are things that I think men can do, or you can encourage the men in your life to do, to really change the landscape of masculinity. The first is to simply listen, and you're here today to listen. You've heard stories, powerful stories. Listen to those stories, and then once you've listened, think about them. Men, don't be so quick to open up your mouth. Take a second, pause, breathe, be mindful, and then do. And it may not involve you opening up your mouth. It may involve you opening up your wallet or opening up your arms to get on the ground, put your boots on the ground, and do some action. Men, do not expect a welcoming party or a complimentary gift bag for showing up to these conversations. I'm serious. You are no better off and you deserve no trophy for being involved. This is so critical. Get involved, be expectant to get on the ground and do some work. Whatever you do, don't stay silent and don't quit when it's hard just because you can. Because there are people across the globe that can't quit having these conversations because their very lives depend on it. Encourage your kids, your grandkids, your friends, or yourself to get enrolled in a gender studies course. It can really change your life. There's real power in theory. There's real power in scholarship and higher education. Expose yourself to those ideas and educate yourself with the right materials. I think by following those steps together, we can sort of come out of that mask, come out from behind that mask of masculinity and create real change. I'll conclude with a quote today. Happened this week, I thought was very timely, from President Obama at Representative Elijah Cummings' funeral. And he said this: being a strong man includes being kind. You're not a sucker, to have integrity and to treat others with respect.
Phil Wagner, A Hard Act to Follow. Okay, we are ready to wrap this up. Before lunch, I told you I was membership chair for the Gulf Coast chapter, so I'm just going to plug membership while I'm up here, and I've got this mic. If you are a member, please make sure that we have your correct email address and phone number. I do send out emails to everybody, and if I've got the wrong one, I'm sending off just into the ether. If you think you are a member, but you didn't have a member on your little sticker, something is wrong. So do contact me and let me see if I can help you. If you would like to become a member, we have applications. There were 2 on every table, and there's more on the membership table, so do see Kristen on the way out. We have postcards of our upcoming events. Take them with you. They let you know that our next event will be a community conversation on gender equality, and that's exactly 4 months from now on January 26th at Bookstore 1. Take our program with you for more information. If you have a donation that you would like to make, there were several on every table, but if they've all been taken and you didn't get an opportunity, then Biz over here with the daisies has got more cards, so she can deliver those to you. If you'd like to buy your centerpiece, you need to take this little square to either Howard in the way back or to Suzanne, our treasurer. All right. Well, that brings us to the end of our program. Thank you very much for coming. I hope you met some new people, made some new friends. We'll see you in January.